Art is the artist, right?
Right.
So what does your art mean to you?
My art is the way I express things, and I express things in so many different ways, through music, through fitness, through mental health, and now on my new venture as an author of the book Black Boy Anxiety. All those ways allow me to express my art and my craft, and it actually addresses the human condition of everybody. So that's what my art means to me. And so a little bit about my book. It talks about my human experience with anxiety. I started years back experiencing some abuse and some a burn trauma, and from those events I developed anxiety. But at the time, didn't know what it was. Just thought that's the way everybody was living, and that is not the way everybody lives. Everybody doesn't create these stories about when they're going to a party. They're not like, oh my God, things are gonna happen bad to me. Having these ruminating thoughts about people looking at you or judging you constantly, that was what my life was like. And that a lot of that happened because of my burn trauma, and I always thought people were gonna be seeing my scars and kind of judging me, and so from that point on, I think my anxiety really kind of built up over my lifetime until I realized what it was, and then I was able to become the wounded healer.
Okay. I know when I read your book, and I think the best way to sum it all up for me was based off of a poem that you had in there called Stressed Out.
Stressed out?
Yes. It was like, the stress of life can bring you down. Negative life events will hang around. If you do not forget.
So, you want me to read it?
Yes.
Stressed out. The stress of life can bring you down. Negative life events will hang around. If you don't figure it out, trauma will come back and stress you out. Because the basis of that poem is that a lot of us develop all of this stress and we hold on to it. We have traumatic events that happen in life and we never process it. And process is a therapeutic term, meaning you never sit there and understand how you were impacted by that thing. And so that's the premise of this poem, and I'll read it again. It's stressed out. The stress of life can bring you down. Negative life events, that's trauma, whatever, will hang around. They're gonna stay there until you actually, if you do not figure them out, then trauma will come back and stress you out. And that means your stress is just gonna constantly keep building up until you address it. So, yes.
Also, I like how you broke down minority trauma, and you wrote on George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery in correlation to the dehumanization of Black people as a whole. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and see, and I took it all the way back to actual slavery, but I mentioned those two cases as well because that's trauma to us as African Americans. And we never processed, our ancestors who went through slavery, they never had the opportunity to process their trauma. So they died with that. But I was reading another book, it's called It Didn't Start With You, where the author was saying basically your great-grandparents, if they had trauma, the mom specifically, if she didn't process that trauma, she passed that through her eggs to her daughter, to her daughter, to her daughter. And so never being processed. So that was my point with bringing those cases up, is that we do have racial trauma that we still kind of go through every day now, and we have to process that. We have to understand how that impacts us. And I know some people will be like, slavery was such a long time ago, but it happened to our ancestors who never processed it. And if you read that book, I think it's called Epigenetics, where it's saying we pass trauma, the mom passes trauma down through her eggs to her offspring. So Yeah, that's a lot. But anxiety, the reason I wanted to address it, because I think a lot of people really believe that anxiety is just like being nervous, but it is a lot more than that. It can keep you from going to work, going to school. You know, if you have some things too, if you have PTSD, that's anxiety, that's a form of anxiety. Claustrophobia is a form of anxiety. And those are really disabilitating. They will not allow you to do certain things. Like if you're claustrophobic, you may struggle getting on an elevator and that's the only way you can get to your place, and you may take the stairs. That can become problematic. So anxiety is much deeper. And if you feel like you still don't grasp it, pick this book up and it gives you really details on how anxiety can show up in your life and you not even realize it. And so that's another reason why I wrote the book. I wanted it to be kind of like a self-help book to where it helps people understand what anxiety is. And I offer like suggestions on how to kind of start processing it. But the key is that I want you to know how important therapy is to the African American community and to everyone, not just the African American community, but we have a stigma. I talk about that in here too, about, therapy. And so I wanted to cover that topic as well. But it's a good book. It comes from, I started writing it during the pandemic, and I just kind of poured out everything that I had within me as far as that related to my life. My anxiety got kind of worse during the pandemic as well. I know a lot of people struggled with anxiety during the pandemic because you were isolated. You couldn't do certain things. There was a fear, a threat out there of your life. If you went out there, you got sick, which created anxiety. And so my client caseload kind of increased. And so this was a therapeutic way for me to get out the anxiety that I was feeling at the moment. And that was to just write it, journal. And this is the product of all of that.
Yes, I think you did a very, 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 very good job explaining how you experienced trauma, which would roll over into your adulthood and the way that you processed everything. So I think anyone that's going to pick up this book and read, they will learn a lot of great things, a lot of great tips as far as how to process anxiety and truly to go seek some professional help or whatever.
Yeah, and that's my big point that I wanted to get across in this book is that anxiety, therapy is good for everyone. Like, I know I wrote about it in the book, but I think we thought therapy was for white people when it was for the rich white people, but it's something that we need because therapy allows us to have someone to give us eye contact, to sit there attentively listening to us and trying to understand our behavior patterns while processing their hurt, their trauma. And if you just hold that in and never get that out, that is detrimental to your mental health. We all go to the doctor all the time for physical ailments. You hurt your arm, you break your leg, you feel sick, you're gonna go to the doctor. But we have to learn to do that same thing with mental health. And I don't think it's stressed enough in our society that you have to take care of the mental aspect of yourself because it is detrimental, especially if you've been diagnosed with like a terminal disease. Your mental health can actually be the thing that helps you survive because you don't let that negativity take over your thought process. You're ready to fight. You're having positive thoughts. You're not just thinking the doomsday and everything. You need positive mental health to get through some of the terminal diseases. Yeah. So as you can tell, I'm an African American male advocating for mental health, and this book is one of the tools that I'm using to advocate for mental health, especially in the Black and brown communities.
Okay, you made a statement, the past must be explored to move forward and make meaning out of every negative experience before moving to the next phase of your life. Mm-hmm. Expound on that.
Sure. So what I usually do in my therapy sessions with my clients is we start all the way at the beginning of your life, that means your childhood, because that's where you learn to be who you are. So if you had any kind of trauma and you coped with that trauma, that coping method that you're using as a child, you usually use that same coping method as an adult. But the problem with that is it doesn't always work. But then on the flip side of that, if you never explore your past, you can't move into your present, is basically what that statement was saying, because you don't understand yourself. You don't understand the impact that your trauma had on you. And that's what I see in a lot of people, is that they're hurt. They were hurt when they were kids. They struggled with something when they were kids. Parents may have done something to them when they were kids, and they just never processed it. And then when they got older, this stuff comes back, just like the Stressed Out poem says, it comes back and it makes you deal with it. And that comes out in different ways: mental health issues, sometimes physical issues as well. So that's the gist of that statement.
Dr. Frederick Brockington.
Yes.
Born in Hampton, Virginia.
Exactly.
Born and raised.
Born and raised, Hampton, Virginia, 332 Catalpa Avenue, Hampton, Virginia, 23661 was my childhood address. I still remember it.
Sound like some numbers you need to play.
I know, right? 332.
Okay. Talk about your journey to becoming a therapist.
Journey to becoming a therapist. So what happened was, every time I would be at work, sitting in my cubicle, doing IT stuff, at an insurance company, people would walk up to the desk, talk to me, I would give them advice, they would talk about what was going on in their life, and I would give them advice, and my friends would also do the same. And so I was like, you know what, I need to explore the mental health field, because I do like helping people. I do like listening to their problems and kind of giving them a different perspective, not telling them what to do, but giving them a different perspective. And so then I decided to go back to grad school. I had been in the business world for a long time, and I decided to go back to grad school to obtain my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And so that's where it started. I was in the business world. I wanted to help people in a different way. And so then I went and got my master's and PhD after that in mental health. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's one of my artistic avenues, as if you want to say, because I feel like I have, my brand is kind of, it's music, it's fitness, it's health, it's mental health. So it's what we would call in the therapy world a holistic approach, where you're actually helping every aspect of the human body, physically, mentally, and then their soul as well. So yeah, so my art is very holistic, I would say.
So some of the three things that we can say that you love is, help healing others. Mm-hmm. Like you said, emotionally, physically, and mentally, which all ties in because your music that you write is therapeutic as well. Because as we all know, music relieves stress, depending on what song you listen to. So, like some of your songs, like Just As I Am, I'm Not Perfect, and You Made Life Better, just to name a few. And I've been knowing you for some years, so I often get people that come in like, oh, I love, his lyrics and what he had to say. It helped me. Or I listened to some of his episodes of his show, and oh my God, it was like he was sitting there talking to me, Mm-hmm. So I think how you were able to tie it all together in your book, Black Boy Anxiety, The Wounded Healer, was perfect. And it's definitely a great read. And I know people that will read it would truly, you just get a better understanding of how to process things or whatever. And it also gave me a different perspective on you as well. Mm-hmm. Because although we've been knowing each other for many years, it summed up a lot of different things or whatever. And I know personally from, conversations that you and I had or whatever, and reading the book, it was like, wow.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
But I've been hearing that a lot of the people that's reading it, they're like, oh my, I'm getting to know you and everything about you kind of from this book. Because we're all created, back to what I was saying earlier, we're all created from our childhood. And that we bring a lot of the stuff that we went through into childhood. And if you don't do some kind of exploration, self-exploration like this, which is what this book was for me, you'll never understand yourself truly.
Yeah. I can definitely say, because I've been on a spiritual journey myself as far as gaining understanding, and it's definitely not easy to stand in those different stages, as you point out in the book, of how to process your childhood trauma. Like forgiving the little person inside of you that is wounded, hurt, and seeking that attention from other people, or seeing red flags and not running away from those things. Not necessarily running away, because people may look at it as being a bad thing, saying run away, but just, protecting yourself, protecting your energy or whatever. So I really, truly recommend anyone to really pick up the book, and you'll learn a lot of different things or whatever. So, because I know with some of the things I read, it's things that we've talked about over the years, but just to actually see it written down really gives you a better understanding. And I think the stages that you talk about to help people process, death and trauma and childhood trauma, the I think the clean slate stages and everything. Very helpful.
Referring to that, the Brockington stages of anxiety is where, and this is what I feel like, if you were a baby, you were born as a clean slate, nothing happened to you, and you went through your life that way, and nothing ever, you probably won't experience anxiety. But if you have some kind of trauma like I did, like the burn trauma, that changed my life drastically. But my parents probably didn't think, they were just happy that their little baby survived. But it left me as a child with so much trauma, because I was constantly worrying about people looking at my burn, and that made me anxious. Like I think I talked about the story as far as being in the gym and having to change clothes in PE class, and I would go into a stall so people wouldn't see me, and all of that just built up anxiety. Imagine being in the line as a kid and you have a scar on you, and somebody's standing behind you and they see it. Those are the things that built my anxiety, and so I went through life that way. And so this stage of the Brockington stages of anxiety kind of talks about how it can develop if you have one traumatic experience and you don't deal with it, how it can just go with you for the rest of your life.
Yes, most definitely. And as you referred in your book, those ruminating thoughts where really you're just beating up yourself with those thoughts. I think that's the best way to describe it or whatever.
Yeah, so ruminating thoughts are those thoughts that we just keep having about things that make us feel bad about ourselves. Just like you just said, they could be like, oh, nobody wants you. Oh, when you go into that room and you have on the clothes, they say you're fat. All these thoughts that just keep, but nobody ever said those things. That's all mental. That's all negative, what we call in therapy, negative self-talk. And if you don't learn how to quiet those voices, you will never go anywhere. You may go to parties, you may attend a business, because you're constantly, that negative self-talk voice is just constantly going. And until you learn to silence it, that's what your life is going to be like. And that's anxiety. Anxiety is thinking about things that have no real threat. You create this narrative in your head, but it's probably not going to happen. It's like, for example, getting on an elevator thinking it's going to get stuck. That's probably very rarely can happen, but it's probably not going to happen on an everyday basis. But somebody with claustrophobia, that's a constant fear that as soon as they get on the elevator, it's going to shut, close, and they can't get out. And so if you don't ever face that, or, we do exposure therapy with that type of stuff, where we put you on the elevator for a little while and then take you off. And then the next day we put you on there for a little longer, and we may go up to the 6th floor and then get off. Just a little bit to introduce you. So there's tricks of the trains that therapists have to kind of help you process your trauma. But if you never go to therapy, you won't ever be able to move forward in your life. The goal for everybody should be living the best version of yourself. You should always want to be the best version of yourself possible. And identifying and doing self-reflection on yourself and understanding yourself.
Okay, so what made you write Black Boy Anxiety and to allow people to see you in a vulnerable light?
I really voted for the Black and Brown community just to highlight therapy, because I feel like even with my family, half of the stuff that I went through, we didn't really consider that trauma. I think people think trauma is like getting in a car accident or, crashing into something, but trauma can be verbal abuse. It could be like a burn like I had, or some serious illness, the death of a parent, grandparent, all of that. It impacts everybody differently, and that's trauma. And so that's what I wanted to write this book about. It's just like, see how this Black boy went through this stuff. It created this anxiety, and now he's showing me how therapy can help, how coping skills can help, but until I identify those things, I may not get better. And that's what was the goal of this book. But yeah, and teach people how to process.
Okay. Let people know where they can purchase your book.
Sure. This book is on Amazon. It's at Barnes and Noble online. It's in Walmart. I didn't realize it until I Googled it the other day and it popped up in Walmart. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Walmart. Or you can order a copy at www.darefb.com, and that's my personal website. It's a great book. I mean, I think I put a lot of time into it to make sure that I express the things that happened to me. And see, like with that sound, if you have anxiety, that would like set you out like, oh my God, this is not perfect. Oh my God, but that is how you get to anxiety. I do that to my class a lot. I'll switch to blues and Zumba, and so then they're like, oh my God, we're doing it wrong. I'm like, no, it's okay. That's teaching you that things in life are not always going to be perfect. Anxiety wants you to think that life is perfect, but it is not always perfect. Things are going to happen. You're going to fall, all of those things. But you pick yourself back up. But sometimes you need a therapist to help you do that. And yes, I am pushing therapy. I'm pushing therapy for Black and brown people. And my Caucasian friends too. I just don't want to isolate everybody, but I think the statistics show that they go to therapy more so than we do. And so that's why I stress Black boy anxiety, especially Black men. Black women are getting there. I think they're starting to go to therapy more, but Black men are still kind of like, I don't want to tell anybody my personal business. The Black family back in the day, you prayed about it, you kept it in the family, you kept it hush hush, but you don't ever go tell some stranger about your business. And I want to change that dynamic, because if you're telling a professional person about what you went through, they can help you get from being stuck or traumatized or anything like that. So yeah, let's change that mindset for all communities, really.